Hey, it's Dave here. In this video, I'm going to walk you through setting up Bermuda in Home Assistant step by step. We'll start by preparing our Bluetooth scanners and making sure our devices are broadcasting properly, including Android and iOS. Then we'll install Bermuda, add trackers, and get area level tracking working. After that, I'll cover calibration and finish with a practical automation example. By the end, you'll have a fully working Bermuda setup that you can build on and refine over time. Now, before we dive in, if you've already watched my ESPHresence video, you'll notice there's a little bit of overlap, especially around broadcasting. So feel free to use the chapter timestamps and skip to the sections that are relevant to you. For those of you new to Bermuda, it's another way of doing room or area level presence tracking using Bluetooth proxies. Like ESPHresence, it tracks devices based on signal strength, but instead of assigning a device to the node it's closest to, Bermuda uses what it calls scanners and determines the device area based on the strongest signal. So if you've got multiple scanners assigned to something like the lounge, your phone will simply show its area as lounge, which I personally find much cleaner. Another benefit, unlike ESPHresence, you don't need a dedicated ESP32 running separate firmware. You can just enable Bluetooth proxy on your existing ESPHome devices. And Bermuda integrates natively into Home Assistant rather than relying on MQTT, which simplifies the overall setup. I highly recommend checking out the official Bermuda documentation. Ashley Gittins has clearly put a huge amount of effort into it, with the detailed explanations and research behind how it works. If you'd like to support his project, I'll leave a link to his Buy Me a Coffee page in the description. Before we get started, you need Home Assistant up and running, ESPHome add-on, now called ESPHome App as of February 2026, and HACS installed as well. With that out the way, let's get started by flashing or configuring your ESP32 boards with Bluetooth proxy enabled. From Home Assistant, if you go into ESPHome and then click New Device, then select Continue, select New Device Setup, and I'm just going to give this an example name. Then click Next. Now for device type on the boards I'm referencing, if you are using a ESP32 38-pin USB-C board, we're going to select ESP32. And if we're using the LilyGo T-Internet PoE, you can also select ESP32. If you are using the WaveShare version of the board, then it will be ESP32S3, which is this one here. And that's the one I'm going to be flashing in this example. So I'll select that. And then I'm just going to click Skip. And I should now see that board somewhere, which is here. So if I click on Edit, now there's a few things in this YAML you're going to need to change. If you're using a Wi-Fi based ESP32 board only, at a minimal level, all you need to do is add this Bluetooth proxy reference, which will just go here and then you can flash the board. If you're using an Ethernet based ESP32 board, you'll need to replace this Wi-Fi value with Ethernet, along with removing the access point and captive portal values because they are referenced for Wi-Fi only, and I'll show you what happens if you leave them there later. From the official ESPHome Ethernet documentation, it lists some examples of Ethernet settings along with the correct ports. However, when using my LilyGo T-Internet PoE board, which I purchased from this site here, you'll notice this is a slightly different variant, which is version 2. So when I use these Ethernet values and flash the board, I ended up getting an error message like this. And I managed to get it working by referencing these values here instead. But don't worry, I'll link in the description the versions I've tested and can confirm works. Now for the WaveShare PoE board, which I'm going to be flashing, these values here referenced do work. The WaveShare version of the board I purchased from Amazon, which is this one here. So I'm going to copy them now. Back into ESPHome, I'm just going to delete this Wi-Fi value and I'll paste in the Ethernet value. And you're going to immediately notice there's an error by the access point section here. As mentioned earlier, this is a Wi-Fi reference which you no longer need because we're using Ethernet. So we're going to delete both the access points and the captive portal. Now we're going to need to reference Bluetooth proxy. And if you go to the ESPHome Bluetooth proxy documentation, it will list various commands along with what they do. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this, but if you want to read up more, I'll put a link in the description to that page. Now you can either just add this value Bluetooth proxy, which will enable it with all the default settings. Now I'm going to specify all of these settings, but they're actually going to be set at default. So it's going to look something like this. I'll share this on GitHub in case you want to copy and paste it, but the purpose of this is if you later want to dial down some of the settings, because you've already got them specified, it'd be a lot easier to change them later on, instead of later adding them into ESPHome and maybe getting the YAML or the indentation wrong. So at the moment, this is really no difference to just having it like that, because it is actually the default settings, but at least it allows you to dial them down later if you wanted to. Now we're going to save changes, click install, and because it's the first time we're flashing it via USB, we're going to select plug into this computer. This can take a few minutes because it's got to compile the firmware. Once that's finished, if you select download project and choose a top option, which is factory format, and you should get some sort of a notification on your browser to show it's being downloaded. I'm then going to select Open ESPHome Web. From here, if you click Connect and choose the correct COM port connected, which for me is COM port 3, then click Connect. I'm going to choose Install instead of Prepare for first time because I've already got the bin file. I'm then going to browse to the path where it's downloaded, which is here, and select Open. Then select Install, and you may need to press the boot button, but in this example, it's already doing something. Once that's installed, you can just close it, close that window and go back to ESPHome. I'm just going to close that tab and click on the X button. And from Bluetooth proxy, I'm just going to click on the logs. And what I'm expecting is to see an IP address. If it hangs for a bit, either close it and go back in, or just press the reset button on the board, which I'm going to do now. That's looking good. And you can see there, it's got an IP address. So I know that's online. And I also know it's online via Ethernet because I didn't reference Wi-Fi in the YAML. Now this next step is optional, but you might want to go back into Edit and under Ethernet or under Wi-Fi, depending on what board you're using, you might want to set a manual IP address. So this is totally optional, but just under Ethernet, I'm just pasting in that value. The IP was already that address, and I just wanted to keep that address. Another option you could have done is from your home router, you might want to set a DHCP reservation. Again, this is totally optional, but I thought I'd just bring it up in case you wanted to do that. Once making that change, you would then have to click Save, click Install, but this time you can flash over the network or over wireless. So I'm going to choose the top option, and ESPHome is just going to recompile it and flash it over the air. And now you can see those changes have been saved and it's been reflashed. So I'm just going to click stop to close that window. Once that's been flashed, you're then going to need to add it as a discovered device into ESPHome. If you go into settings, then go to devices and services, and you should see it somewhere here under discovered. And if you click add, and then just click submit. And I'm just going to give this the area test. And now it's added to ESPHome. Now, for those of you wanting to use Shelly devices as a scanner, the documentation from the Bermuda wiki references Shelly Plus devices or later are able to act as Bluetooth proxies to Home Assistant. Now, while I don't have a Shelly Plus device myself, this is one I've previously purchased from Amazon. From the Home Assistant Shelly integration page, not only does it detail the steps to integrate that device, but it also references a section here on Bluetooth scanner mode. And it says Bluetooth scanning can be active or passive. With active, the Shelly requests data from nearby devices. With passive, the Shelly receives unsolicited data from nearby devices. Another way of looking at that is if it's set to active, it's listening and requesting data, and if it's set to passive, it's listening only. In this example, I'm actually going to set it to passive only. So from Home Assistant, if you go to Settings, then go to Devices and Services, and select Add Integration, and do a search for Shelly. Then select Shelly. And from this page, you're either going to type in the host name or the IP address of your Shelly device, and then click Submit. I've already added mine, so I'm just going to close that window, and then do a search here for Shelly. And click on that one. And you can see here, this is one of my existing Shelly devices. And if I select this configure button, I've then got the option of Bluetooth scanner mode, disabled, active, or passive. So I'm going to change that to passive and then just click submit and then finish. While you're on this page, you're going to want to give it a more friendly name and also specify the device location. So if you click on Edit Device, now because my existing ESP32 boards have got Bluetooth proxy underscore as the prefix name, I'm going to make that exactly the same. I do already have one in the lounge, so I'm just going to call this Lounge 2. I've already specified the area to lounge, and then I would select Update. Now, even though I renamed it here, you'll also need to rename it under Bluetooth Integration 2. That's because when we enabled Bluetooth scanning on the Shelly device, it created an additional entity there as well. Otherwise, in Bermuda, it's still going to have this old referenced name. So if you go into Settings, then go to Devices and Services, and just do a search for Bluetooth, and select Bluetooth here. And you can see it here as well. So from this section, I'm going to select Edit Device, and I'm just going to paste in that exact same name, and then click Update. And while you're in Bluetooth settings, for sanity checks, you might just want to confirm all these scanners have got the correct areas set. So for this one here, where it's Bluetooth proxy bedroom, if I just select Edit Device, and I can see that has correctly got bedroom, and then I can go to lounge and just make sure that one's got lounge, and so on. Next, I'm going to show you how to enable BLE broadcasting on your Android device and how to retrieve the IRK, that's the Identity Resolving Key, if you're using an iPhone. To explain this properly, I've put together a quick PowerPoint which I'll bring up now. Before we get started, these slides are available as a downloadable PDF. If you want to reference them later, there's a link in the description. From the Home Assistant app on your mobile phone, if you click the hamburger menu on the top left, then select Settings, select Companion App, and then click Manage Sensors, then select BLE Transmitter, and just make sure Enable Sensor is turned on. These are the BLE settings you can change. For most people, you can leave them as default, but I'll quickly explain what each one does. Advertise mode controls how often beacons broadcast. Low latency sends updates more frequently, giving faster room detection at a cost of a higher battery usage. Transmit on home network only broadcasts when connected to your home Wi-Fi. This helps save battery by preventing unnecessary BLE broadcasting when you're away. You'll need to tell Home Assistant which network is your home network. I'll cover that shortly. Major, used to group beacons together. You can leave this as default unless you're deliberately grouping multiple devices. Measured power represents signal strength at 1 meter. Bermuda uses this to estimate distance, so it's best left unchanged. Minor is a unique ID for this specific beacon, useful for distinguishing between multiple devices. Enable transmitter must be left on, otherwise nothing will broadcast. Transmission power controls Bluetooth range. Higher power increases range but uses more battery. And UUID, the unique identifier for the beacon. Bermuda uses this to recognize and track the device. The UUID, major and minor together, define the beacon's identity. These are values Bermuda uses to recognize and track the device, so make note of them because we'll need them when adding them into Bermuda. For transmission power, I'm going to leave it at default, which is medium. Advertise mode, again, leave it as default for low latency. And if you have enabled transmit on home network only, if you go back one step and go to home, then click on home network, and assuming you're already at home and you can see your wireless, click on that option, and then you should now see it selected with the X to deselect. You can also manually type in your SSID and then click the add button. And then once I've done that, you can see the 5 GHz one is the one I'm currently connected to. And the other one, which I've manually connected, I'm currently not connected to. I'm going to go back a step. You can see I've got two options. One is my 2.4 GHz wireless, and on the one on the right is my 5 GHz Wi-Fi. Now, for those of you who don't have the Home Assistant app on your Android mobile, there's another way of turning on BLE transmitter via beacon scope. From the Google Play Store, if you do a search for beacon scope, and you'll get this warning about app will run in the background, just click OK to that. And if you select transmit, from here the settings are going to look very similar to the Home Assistant companion app. You've got proximity, UUID, major and minor, and I've just given you another example of what that would look like when you're searching for the device. Now, because transmission power was defaulted to medium on the Home Assistant companion app, I'm just going to change that to medium just so it reflects the same settings. And then from transmit on the top left, if you just click on that icon, and then it should change from off to on. Now, to track devices that use a random MAC address, we first need to obtain the Identifier Resolving Key, or IRK. From this documentations page, there are multiple ways to retrieve it. Using Mac OS, a rooted Android mobile, on Windows, and it also references ESPHome. Now, for this example, I'm going to be demonstrating it on a Windows laptop. Now, just to be clear, whatever device it is you want to track, like an iPhone, you need to have already paired it via Bluetooth to that Windows PC before you go through these steps. So from my PC, I'm just going to open up Bluetooth settings. And then on my iPhone, I'll go to Settings, Bluetooth, and I should see Studio PC, which is mine. And I'm just going to accept that prompt to pair it. And that device is connected. Now we're going to continue following these instructions, which tells you to download PS Exec tool from Microsoft when you click on this link. And that will take you to this page here. And if you just download that file, once you've downloaded it, what I've done is extracted the contents into my C drive, which I've done earlier and looks something like this. Once that's downloaded, you're going to open Command Prompt as admin. Now you're going to browse to the directory where those files are saved. And in my case, it's C PS Tools. So I'm just going to run this command. Then it's going to give you the choice to run one of these two commands. I'm going to run the 64-bit one, which is this one here. And just paste it into that command window. And then just click agree to that prompt. And it should now open another command window. I can close this existing one. And I'm just going to snap this here. Step 4 is optional, but it just asks you to run a whoami command. And it should reference system, which it is. Now at step 5, we're going to launch regedit from command, but you must do it from this command window. Otherwise, when you navigate to the path it references, you won't see any values. Now we're at step 6, and I'm just going to browse to that path it references. And then step 7 is you're just going to right click on this folder and select export and then save it to a location. And now step 8, we're going to open that registry key in Notepad. Just don't forget to change this to all files, otherwise it won't show up. And now I'm just going to click open. Now the value you'll need to look for is this IRK reference, and you'll want to copy this section here, but you'll need to remove the commas. So I'm just going to do a find and replace. And then just type in comma and then replace all. And now it should look something like that, where I can copy this value here. Now we're going to need to add this private BLE integration into Home Assistant, which you can either do by clicking on this link or just follow the manual steps from Settings, Devices and Services, Add Integration. So if we go into Home Assistant, go to Settings, Devices and Services, and if you click Add Integration and then do a search for Private BLE, select this option here. Now just before I paste that value, I'm going to purposely put in the wrong value, because if you do something like this, you may get an error message like that, and it's a good chance you've misread the instructions and you haven't correctly located the IRK value from that registry. I'm now going to correctly paste in the value, click submit. Now I'm just going to change the device name, but I'm going to leave private BLE as a prefix. So I'll just put underscore and then I'll call it Dave's iPhone. Now for area, there's no point in selecting one because it's going to be changing dynamically. Now I'm going to click skip and finish. Now I'm just going to go back into that private BLE again. And you should now see one device And it's also got this MAC address here, but you don't actually need to do anything with that because the private BLE device integration should automatically add that device into Bermuda. If you add that MAC manually, you might find that when it refreshes, it will stop working. Now, while I haven't yet covered how to install Bermuda and add devices, I'm just going to quickly fast forward just to show you that this device does add automatically. So from Home Assistant, I'm going to go into Settings, go to Devices and Services, and then do a search for Bermuda. And now while I click this menu and select Reload, then click OK, you can now see here it's showing Private BLE Dave's iPhone. So we know that's added automatically. Now that our scanners are set up and our devices are broadcasting properly, we can move on to installing the Bermuda integration via HACS. So let's get back into Home Assistant and get that installed. To install the Bermuda integration, if you go to HACS and do a search for Bermuda, and it'll be this one, Bermuda BLE Trilateration. And then if you select Download, and then click Download again. Once that's downloaded, if you go to Settings, and then Devices and Services, and if you click Add Integration, and do a search for Bermuda, click on this one, and then click Submit. Once it's created, it's going to give you the option of device name, which will default to Bermuda Global. And it's also going to ask for the area, but this isn't referring to one of your scanners. I'm going to leave it as Hall because that's where my Home Assistant servers are. Now I'm going to click Skip and Finish. And you should now see Bermuda under your devices, which I can see here. So I'm going to click onto that. Now at a glance, this can seem quite daunting because as you go through the menus, there's a lot of settings and configurations you can apply. For those of you who were click happy earlier, if you click on the edit device, this is where you can change the Bermuda global name and give it another area if you wanted to change it. I don't, so I'm going to click cancel. If you select configure, this should give you a list of scanners that you've added earlier from ESPHome, or those of you who added a Shelly device, that should show here as well. In my current live environment, I've got 3 devices, which is the bedroom, hall and lounge. So that's looking good. There's various different options here, which I will be covering later on, but I highly recommend you go to the official Bermuda wiki page, which can be found here and covers a lot of the settings in detail. When you click on Bermuda Global, it's just going to give you various diagnostics like active proxy count, device count, total proxy, and physical device count. What I want to do now is add one of your devices to track, and then later we'll go through the calibrations and settings in more detail. So if you click on Configure, and then choose Select Devices, click Configure Devices. Now I know that my mobile phone is broadcasting as an iBeacon, and I've already got the details here from earlier. So I'm going to select this one, and then click Submit, and then click Finish. And now that device has been added. If I click into it, I can see it's got the area, bedroom, and the distance, which seems to be fluctuating a bit at the moment. What I want to do is give that a name. So I'm just going to click on Edit Settings. And I'm just going to call it Dave's Mobile. No need to specify an area because that's constantly changing, and it'd be Bermuda that is dynamically specifying that. Now I'm going to click Update. And if I go back, it's a little bit clear and I can see that's my mobile phone. And what you should find is if you walk into different rooms where your scanners are, that value where it says area will change to the nearest scanner. Now you're going to notice there's some disabled entities here which I can click on, and some of which are quite useful, like distance to Bluetooth proxy bedroom, hall or lounge. But just before you click on those settings and start enabling them, if you go to the official documentation, it does mention a bunch of sensors like distance from scanner and stuff are disabled by default because there are many of them, and enabling lots will bog down your system and cause your recorded database to grow possibly a lot. So if you are going to start enabling those entities, maybe only consider doing it for triage purposes and then turn it off when you no longer need it. Now I'm just going to repeat myself on what I said earlier on adding devices via Identity Resolving Key or IRK. If you have used the integration under Bluetooth BLE device showing here, and you can see this is an example where I've added my iPhone. If you're following this video in the same order and you'd already integrated the private BLE device and added the IRK, the device should be showing here, but if it's not, I'm just going to quickly sabotage it and remove device. And what you will need to do is just click on these three dots and select reload, then click OK, and it should appear. You may need to do this when you've also added any additional identity resolving keys, so just something to make note of. Now that we've added these devices, you might want to assign one of these trackers to a user in Home Assistant. If you go to Settings, and then scroll down and look for People, and I'm just going to select one of my accounts here. And under this setting, select a device that belongs to the person. If you select Add Entry, and then do a search for Tracker, you can see here I've got Dave's mobile and private BLE Dave's iPhone. So if you select one of those devices, and then you would just click Save. I've already got a handful of phones, so I'm just going to remove that entry and click Cancel. Now I'm going to want to confirm a device is successfully updating to a new area when I move it from one room to the other. If we go back into Settings, Devices and Services, and then do a search for Bermuda, and I'm just going to select one of my devices, so I'll use Dave's mobile. And the entity ID you'll want to look for is this part here where it's got area. So if we click on that, and then click on the settings icon, that is the entity ID you'll want to copy if you're using it for automations. You may want to change it to something a bit cleaner, but I'm going to leave that as it is. You can also give it a friendly name under here, but if I just go back one step, it's currently just going to have the friendly name Dave's mobile area because the device is already called Dave's mobile and it's just added area at the end. So I'm going to leave that name blank and let Home Assistant leave the friendly name as it is. Now I'm just going to leave that window open and go into a new tab. And we're going to want to go into Developer Tools. Now, depending on the version of Home Assistant you're running, Developer Tools may be around this location, but as of update February 2026, they've decided to move it under Settings, and then you scroll down and you'll see Developer Tools is now here. And personally, I preferred it on the sidebar. So we're going to Developer Tools, then select States. And if I do a search under filtered entities, and I can either paste in that entity ID or put what the friendly name was, which is Dave's mobile area. And you can see at the moment it's set to bedroom. What I'm going to do now is just record myself holding my phone and go from one room to the next. And we should see that state is going to change. So I'm currently in the bedroom and I'm now going to walk into the hall. And the state should change shortly. And now it says hall, that's looking good. And I'm going to walk into the lounge. And that's now saying lounge. So that works. The next step is calibration. Now, technically, you can skip this if your area states are already switching correctly. But if you want Bermuda to behave properly, especially when it comes to distance readings, calibration makes a noticeable difference. Let's walk through the official documentation and do it properly. To understand calibration, if you go to the following wiki webpage, and there's 3 steps. Calibration 1 global settings, Calibration 2 per scanner RSSI offsets, and Calibration 3 per device reference power settings. So we're going to start off at step 1. Now at a glance this does seem quite daunting as the documentation is quite long, but once I show you visually it's actually quite straightforward. From Home Assistant, if you go into Settings, and in Devices and Services, and then do a search for Bermuda, and then open that. And if you click on Configure, Calibration 1 Global, and you're going to be presented with these following settings. Back to the documentation, we are currently at this stage after clicking Calibration 1 Global, and we now need to choose a device and scanner and make sure that the device you want to be tracking is 1 meter away from that scanner. Now I'm going to choose the device, which is Dave's mobile, and the scanner is going to be Lounge. Then I click Submit. And you can now see this table where it's got estimated 1 meter and it's got RSS actual value. And as I scroll across, there's 5 separate attempts or values. Now what I'm going to need to change is this reference power section here, as specified by the documentation. The more I go into a negative number, the lower the distance will appear. Now I've already tweaked these calibrations and I find that -80 for my scenario seems to be the sweet spot. So I'm just going to change it to that now, and then click Submit. And as I scroll the slider bar, you can see it's much closer to 1 meter. And you can then press that Submit again to essentially refresh. And that's looking pretty close. You're going to want to press Submit a few times to get multiple different results until you're happy they're starting to stabilize at a reading close to 1 meter. Back to the documentation page, if I just scroll down, we are now at this stage where we're going to calibrate the attenuation settings, and you will need to move your device 5 meters away from the scanner. Then press Submit, and we need to tweak the attenuation settings to get the reading closest to 5 meters. The higher the attenuation value will increase the estimated distance, and the lower will increase the estimated distance. Now it doesn't have to be 5 meters, that's just a sweet spot. So I'm just going to quickly move my device so it's 5 meters away. Now that the device is 5 meters away, I'm going to click Submit, and I should see these values here are going to completely change. Now at the moment they are way off because it shouldn't be showing such a short distance. Now because I want the distance to be longer, I'm going to lower the attenuation value. And when I tried this earlier, I found that 1.5 was the sweet spot. So I'm just going to change it to that and then click Submit. It still seems to be quite off because that's 5 meters. I'm just going to click Submit again. It's quite possible that in this scenario, my phone hasn't broadcasted a signal just yet, so I might be prematurely clicking submit. So I'm just going to give it one more chance before I tweak those settings. Nope, it still seems to be low. So I'm just going to make that number even lower. So let's try 1.3. I've got a feeling this might be too much. Okay, let's try 1.2. Okay, let's try 1.1. Okay, I went back a few steps and I changed the reference power from -80 to -76. Then I set the attenuation value to 1.3 and it seems to be a little bit better. I'm just going to move the device so it's back to 1 meter and just confirm that value at 1 meter is what I want it to be showing. Now the device is back to being 1 meter away from the scanner, so I'm going to hit submit and hope for the best it's behaving itself. That doesn't look too bad. Just press submit again. Yeah, that's pretty close to 1 meter. So for my scenario, the reference power at -76 and the attenuation value set to 1.3. Back to the documentation, if I just scroll down, and we're now at this final stage where once you're happy with the calibration, you can tick save and close and then click the box submit. And that will be your global default for reference power and attenuation. So I'm going to check that box, save and close, and click submit, and then finish. For calibration 2 per scanner RSSI offsets, we go back into the documentation and just scroll a little bit further down. Now, to be honest, unless you've got multiple different scanner types, you don't really need to change any of these settings, as I didn't with mine. From Bermuda, you will click Configure, then select Calibration 2 Scanner RSSI Objects, and you're going to select the same reference device we did earlier, and then click Submit. So if I go back into Home Assistant, click Configure, select the bottom option. For device, I'm going to select Dave's mobile. And you'll notice these are the 4 scanners I've got. And just before I click Submit, this one here, which is Bluetooth Proxy Lounge 2, that is a Shelly Mini. And for some reason, it doesn't show up. So when I click Submit, you'll notice it's only showing 3 devices, which are the ESP32 boards I'm using. So if you have got a Shelly Mini, or at least the version I've got, for some reason it doesn't appear to show up under the offsets section. Now in this table you can see it's got lounge, bedroom and hall, and it's referencing the distance that my mobile phone is from it. And these values here you're going to change manually if you wanted to offset the distance. And from the documentation, it will say here, the larger positive offset will decrease the distance, the smaller negative will increase, and if you leave it to 0, it will just be the default global settings. So for example, on this bottom value here, where it's got proxy hall, and it's showing 7 meters 10, quite a fair distance. If that value wasn't true and it was much closer, I would then bump this number up to a value that's correct, press submit, and then just keep doing it a few times until I've got that sweet spot. And then once I'm happy, I would then check save and close and click submit. But I'm just going to leave those values as they are because I'm already happy, and I'm just going to close that window down. For calibration 3 per device reference power settings, if I go back into the documentation and scroll down, from Bermuda, when you select one of the devices, it's going to bring up this device info page, and the sensor value you'll be looking at is distance, and you'll be changing the calibration at 1 meter here. And the more you go into a negative number, the further the distance is going to be. And the highest number it can be is a 0. So you've either got between 0, which will make it the closest, and -127 to make it the furthest. Good chance there's no need to change this. I haven't on mine, but I'm just going to show you where it is anyway. So from Bermuda, I'm going to select Dave's mobile. It's currently showing 0.70 meters, or now 0.60 from the lounge, which is more or less spot on. It's actually a meter away. And if I wanted to tweak it, I can change this value here. I'm just going to show you what happens if you try to make this a positive number. It's going to throw up an error message. You'll see something like that where it warns you that the range value is between -127 and 0. Now I'm going to just change it to -50 or something. And what's going to happen is the distance is going to greatly increase. So you can see now it's showing at 11 meters, but I'm happy with it at 0. The final area worth mentioning is global options, which you can find under Configure. This includes things like max radius, velocity filtering, update intervals, smoothing, and calibration values. Now, I'm not going to walk through every option here because the official documentation explains them in detail, and in most cases, the defaults work perfectly well. The only settings I changed were attenuation and reference power during the calibration process we covered earlier. If you want to understand what each option does at a deeper level, I'll put a link to the documentation in the description. Now for the final part, I'm going to put together a practical automation example using Bermuda. The scenario here is a guest who has an Android phone or iPhone but doesn't have the Home Assistant companion app installed. When their device arrives home, I'll have my Amazon Echo broadcast a welcome announcement, and because Bermuda knows which area the device is in, the announcement will play from the Echo in that room. And just to make it slightly more useful, I'll also turn the kettle on, assuming they fancy a coffee. From Home Assistant, if you go to Settings, and then Automations and Scenes, then click Create Automation, Create New Automation, and if you click on these 3 dots here, we're going to select Edit in YAML, and I'm just going to paste in the following code. I'll save this code to GitHub and put a link in the description to it. So what this is going to do is when the device tracker state changes to home, it's then going to trigger a list of conditions, which are these ones here. And then based on the state of the sensor area, it's going to send a notification from my Amazon Echo device that's in that area. So for example, if the state is set to lounge, it's going to notify to my Amazon Echo device that's in the lounge, and it will send the following message. And then if I scroll down to the bottom, you've got a default action here where if none of those conditions are met, it will just send it to your default Amazon Echo, which I will set as the one in the hall. And I've also got a switch.turn-on value, which is going to turn on my kettle or coffee machine. I've also added a delay here of 24 hours. So that way, if a guest comes around, it's only going to do this once. And that's what this mode single does. If the trigger happens again within those 24 hours, it will just ignore it. Now to make this work, you're going to need to change some of the values, which I'm going to do now. Starting off first is the device tracker. So if I just open up another tab and go to Settings, Devices and Services, and we're just going to do a search for Bermuda. And the device I'm using is Dave's mobile. And it's this part here under Diagnostics. If you click on that, then select Settings, and you're going to want to copy that entity ID. So I'll just come out of that, go back to the previous tab, and I'm going to overwrite this value here with the entity ID. Then we're going to need to add the device area IDs, which are these following entities. Back into Bermuda, it's going to be this section here where it's got area. So if you click on that, then select Settings, and you're going to copy that entity ID. and I'm just going to paste it in 3 times. Next is to add my Amazon Echo devices, which is these ones here. So back into devices and services, I'm going to do a search for Alexa, and I know the one in the lounge is this one here. And under controls, if I click on this, then select settings, and I only want to copy after the dot value. So the media_player dot we're not interested in. Now I'm going to copy that and go back into the automation. And I'm going to repeat that steps for all of the different areas and Echo devices. I'm just going to quickly paste them in because I've got them earlier. And then finally, if I scroll down, I just need to add my kettle. So if I go back to the devices tab, and my kettle is integrated via Tuya, which is this one here. If I click on that star icon, go to settings, and I'm just going to copy that entity ID, then go back to the other tab, and I'm just going to overwrite that value. Now it's possible you might just want that to turn a light on, but in my case, I've got a smart kettle, so I just want it to turn on. Now just before I save those changes, I'm going to click on these 3 dots and go to Edit in Visual Editor. If you don't know YAML too well, you can always just paste in that code and then switch over to here, and you might find it easier when you're making those changes. It's just a personal preference. Now I'm going to click Save, and I'm just going to leave it as that name and click Rename. And now that automation is created, I'm going to temporarily turn off Bluetooth on my phone, walk into the hall, and then when I turn it on, the state should change to home. I should receive an announcement in the hall, and it will also turn the kettle on. So instead of leaving my flat and walking back in, I've temporarily turned off Bluetooth. I've just switched it back on, and I'm looking at my phone and waiting for the automation to kick in.
Hi Dave. Welcome back. I've put the kettle on in case you want a coffee.
So that's Bermuda set up from start to finish. Scanners, broadcasting, installation, calibration, and a practical automation to tie it all together. If you've made it this far, you should now have Bermuda fully working and understand how to build on it confidently. If this video helped, give it a like and consider subscribing for more Home Assistant tutorials. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.